"You belong to me," my ex insisted, not knowing the Mafia boss was standing right behind us. The alarm was a betrayal, splitting the darkness at 4:30 in the morning. For Madeline Reyes, it was the sound of survival. She never snoozes. She swung her legs out of the small cot, her bare feet meeting the cold, cracked linoleum of her studio apartment. This was her life, small, quiet, and barricaded. She had worked at the Café Siena for 2 years, ever since she'd arrived in Brooklyn with nothing but $100 bill in a duffel bag. 2 years of keeping her head down, of pouring coffee and wiping counters, of being the person no one ever looked at twice. It was exactly what she wanted. Her morning routine was a ritual of defense. Before her shower, she checked the window lock, a flimsy piece of metal she'd reinforced herself with a small block of wood. She checked the deadbolt on her front door, testing it with her shoulder. In her bag, nestled in a worn sock in the lining, was a burner phone. It had not been turned on in 6 months, but she charged it every Sunday, just in case. She flinched when her neighbor's door slammed in the hallway, a jolt so sharp it stole her breath. She leaned against the wall, her hand over her heart, waiting for the adrenaline to fade. Raised voices in the street, a car backfiring. The sudden scrape of a chair in the cafe, these were the things that unraveled her. She walked to the cafe in the pre-dawn gray, just another shadow in a city full of them. The Siena was already humming, its ovens breathing warmth into the air. She tied on her apron, the familiar smell of burnt coffee and sweet pastries settling over her like armor. The day passed in a blur of steam wands and credit card swipes. It was the evening shift she dreaded. The cafe emptied out, leaving her alone with the echoing drip of the old machine and the growing darkness outside. It was a Tuesday, late October, and the sky had opened up. Rain lashed against the front windows, turning the streetlights into blurry, watercolor smears. She was 10 minutes from closing, mopping the floor, when the bell over the door chimed. Madeline's shoulders tightened. No one came in this late, not in this weather. She turned, ready to tell them they were closing, and the words died in her throat. The man standing in the doorway was not a regular. He was tall, and the darkness of his wool overcoat seemed to absorb the cafe's weak lighting. The coat was not just expensive, it was tailored by a hand that understood power. It was perfectly, unnervingly dry. He shook the rain from a black umbrella and placed it, neatly furled, by the door. He walked to the counter, his movements economical and silent. He was not handsome in the way of movie stars. His features were too harsh, his nose slightly crooked, his jaw set in a way that suggested it had never known relaxation. But it was his eyes that held her. They were dark and intensely still, and they were fixed on her. It was not a leer. It was not a glance. It was an assessment. He looked at her, and for the first time in 2 years, Madeline felt seen. It terrified her. "We're closing in 10 minutes, she managed, her voice sounding thin. "Black coffee," he said. His voice was low, a rumble that seemed to vibrate in the floor tiles. "To go?" She turned to the machine, her hands fumbling slightly on the familiar levers. She could feel his gaze on her back, a physical pressure. She poured the coffee, put the lid on, and slid it across the counter. "That'll be $3.20. He placed a $50 bill on the wet counter. "I'm sorry," she said, looking at the bill. "I don't think I can break this. All my belongings are in the safe." He pushed the bill forward another inch. "Keep it. I can't accept that." His eyes met hers again, and a flicker of something, impatience, perhaps, crossed his face. "It's a tip. Take it." Before she could protest again, he picked up the coffee, nodded once, and was gone. The bell chimed, and the door hissed shut, leaving nothing but the damp spot where his umbrella had been and the $50 bill on the counter. He came back 3 days later. It was 9 in the evening, an hour before close. He took the same order, paid with a 20, and told her to keep the change. This time, he did not leave. He sat in the back booth, the one with the cracked vinyl seat that no one liked, and drank his coffee slowly. He didn't read a paper, he didn't look at his phone, he just sat, watching the rain-slicked street. He became a fixture. He never came at the same time. Sometimes it was the afternoon rush. Sometimes it was minutes before closing. He was always quiet, always polite, and always intense, and the tips were always inexplicably generous. "Okay, Maddie, spill," her coworker, Rosie, said one afternoon, snapping her gum. Rosie was everything Madeline was not, loud, bubbly, with hair that changed color every week. "Your mystery man is back." Madeline flushed, scrubbing the milk wand with unnecessary force. "He's not my mystery man, Rosie. He's just a customer. A customer who tips $20 on a black coffee and stares at you like you're the last lifeboat on the Titanic." "Yeah, right." Rosie leaned in. "He's hot, you know? In that scary, I might own a vineyard or kill a guy kind of way. You should smile at him." "I do smile," Madeline protested weakly. "No, honey, you look like a hostage. It's different. Go for it. What's the worst that could happen?" Madeline thought of 100 things that could happen. She thought of charming smiles that turned into fists, of promises that turned into threats. "He's not interested in me. He's just particular." "Uh-huh." Rosie rolled her eyes, but she dropped it. She knew Madeline's boundaries were high and sharp. That night, Madeline walked home feeling the weight of Rosie's words. She let herself into her apartment, engaging the deadbolt, the chain, and the extra security bar she'd installed at the base of the door. She ate stale crackers over the sink, too tired to make real food. She was brushing her teeth when it happened. A vibration from her bedroom. It was not her phone. Her phone was on the counter. Silent. She spat, her heart leaping into her throat. She crept into the main room. The vibration was coming from the bottom drawer of her dresser, from the sock, from the burner phone. Her blood turned to ice. That phone had only one number in it, and he was the only one who had this number. She stared at the drawer, shaking. It buzzed again, an angry, insistent sound in the small, quiet room. "He's in jail," she told herself. "He's in jail. He can't get out. He can't find me." With a trembling hand, she pulled the phone from the drawer. Blocked number. She answered it. She did not say hello. She just listened. For a moment, there was only static. Then, a voice that slithered into her ear. A voice she heard in every nightmare. "Took you long enough, Maddie girl." She could not breathe. The walls of the apartment seemed to be closing in. "Miss me?" The voice was oily, full of a smug confidence she had forgotten. "I missed you. Missed this." "How?" she whispered. It was the only word she could force out. "How'd I find you? You think a little piece of paper from a judge means anything? You think I won't find my girl?" "I'm not your girl." A low chuckle. "You're always my girl, Madeline. I'm out, clean slate. A good behavior kind of guy." He paused. "And I'm coming to see what's mine. I know where you're working. That little coffee and piss shop, Cafe Sienna. Real classy. I'll see you soon, baby." The line clicked. She dropped the phone as if it were on fire. It clattered to the linoleum. She slid down the wall, her back hitting the cabinets. She wrapped her arms around her knees, rocking back and forth, trying to muffle the sounds that were tearing out of her throat. He was out. He knew where she was. The barricades were broken. She did not sleep. She sat in the dark, watching the door until the gray lights of dawn forced her to move. The next day at the cafe was torture. Every jingle of the bell was a shot of pure terror. She spilled a tray of lattes, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't grip the cup. Rosie covered for her, sensing the raw panic rolling off her. "Maddie, you look like death. What's wrong?" "Just tired. Bad night." Her regular phone rang in her apron. It was her landlord, a call she'd been expecting. She turned toward the wall, trying to find a bubble of quiet. "Hi, Mr. Patel. Yes, I got the notice." As she spoke, the bell chimed. She didn't look. She couldn't. "Yes, the rent will be there Friday, I promise." But she could feel a presence. She finished the call, her voice tight, and turned around. He was there. Luca, sitting in the back booth, his coat still on. He was watching her, not casually. He was studying her, his dark eyes missing nothing. Her shift was almost over. Rosie was in the back, counting the register. Madeline's phone buzzed again. It was just a spam text, but the sight of the phone lighting up, coupled with the memory of last night, sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. She gripped the counter, her knuckles white, her breath catching in her throat. She was frozen, seeing not the cafe but a different room, a different man, a different phone. A shadow fell over her. She flinched, hard, staggering back against the espresso machine. It was Luca. He was at the counter. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were full of a sharp, focused concern. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, a solid wall of stillness. "Are you all right?" The low rumble of his voice cut through the panic. It was not a polite question. It was a demand. She couldn't find her voice. She just nodded, her eyes wide. "You're pale," he observed. He looked at the phone in her hand. "Bad news?" "No, it's nothing, just spam." She sounded like a liar, even to herself. He watched her for a long moment, and she knew he didn't believe her. He nodded slowly, then walked back to his booth, picked up his half-finished coffee, and left. He didn't say goodbye. She was shaking when she locked up at 8:05. Rosie had left, and the cafe was dark and silent. The fear of the walk home was a physical weight, pressing down on her chest. She pulled her thin jacket tight and stepped out onto the street, her keys clutched in her fist, the sharpest one pointing out. He was standing there. He was leaning against the building next door, just outside the circle of the streetlight, a man made of shadows. She jumped, a small, terrified sound escaping her. He stepped forward, not too close. "I'll walk you." It was not a question. "You don't have to," she said, her voice small. It's only 3 blocks. I know how far it is." She should have said no. Every rule of survival she had written for herself screamed it. Do not trust, do not accept help, do not be seen, especially not by a man like this, a man who moved with such quiet authority, who looked at the world like he owned it. But then she thought of Darren. She thought of his voice on the phone, and she looked at the dark street, at the shadowed alleyway halfway down the block. She looked at Luca, at his broad shoulders, at his calm, heavy presence. He was the opposite of Darren. Darren was all noise and false light. This man was all silence and solid shadow. Without a word, she pulled her jacket tighter and started walking. He fell into step beside her. He didn't walk too close, leaving a respectable space between them, but he was there. He was on the street side. He said nothing. The only sound was their footsteps on the damp pavement. It was the strangest walk of her life. She didn't scan the alleyways. She didn't look over her shoulder. The buzzing anxiety that lived under her skin quieted, replaced by a different, thrumming tension. They reached her building, its broken front light casting a sick yellow glow on the graffiti-covered door. She stopped at the steps, fumbling in her pocket for her keys. "This is it. Thank you." He looked up at the building, at the cracked windows and the rusty fire escape. His expression hardened for a second, a flicker of something that looked like distaste. "Madeline?" She froze, her head snapping up. Her keys jangled in her hand. "How do you know my name?" He gave a slight gesture with his chin. "Your name tag." "Oh," she flushed. "Right, of course." He did not smile. "Good night, Madeline." He didn't leave. He stood on the sidewalk, a silent guardian, and waited. She fumbled with the 3 locks on the outer door, her hands clumsy. She slipped inside the dim lobby, the smell of old garbage and bleach thick in the air. She paused before heading to the stairs, looking back through the scratched plexiglass of the door. He was still there, watching. He saw her look, gave a single, short nod, and then turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness as silently as he had come. Madeline leaned her head against the cold tile wall of the lobby. Her heart was hammering, but for the first time, it wasn't just fear. It was something else, something deep and unsettling and dangerously warm. It was, she realized with a shudder, the feeling of being safe. And she knew, better than anyone, that safety was the most dangerous illusion of all. The second he appeared, the air in her lungs turned to glass. It had been 3 days since Luca Moretti had walked her home. 3 days of blessed, empty silence. The burner phone remained off, dark and dead in her drawer. She had almost convinced herself the call had been a nightmare, a stress-induced hallucination. Then she saw him. He was across the street from the Café Siena, half hidden by a bus stop shelter. It was him. Thinner, perhaps, his face sharper, meaner, but it was the same slouch, the same restless way he smoked a cigarette, holding it between his thumb and forefinger like a weapon. He was staring, not at the cafe, but at her. A fixed, hungry gaze that crossed 4 lanes of Brooklyn traffic. Madeline's hand froze on the portafilter. Rosie was humming along to the radio, oblivious. Madeline finished pulling the shot of espresso, her movements becoming stiff, robotic. She did not look back out the window. She did not have to. She could feel his eyes on her, a physical weight that made her skin crawl. He was there for an hour. He did not move, except to light a new cigarette from the butt of the last one. The bell over the cafe door chimed. She didn't look up, but she knew it was him. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The scent of rain and expensive wool cut through the aroma of coffee. Luca Moretti. He ordered his usual black coffee. He paid with a 50, as always. She fumbled with his change, dropping a $10 bill. "Sorry," she mumbled, her cheeks burning. She bent to pick it up, but his hand was already there. He retrieved the bill, but instead of taking it, he placed his hand on the counter and looked past her, out the front window. His stillness was absolute. He stared at the bus stop for a long, quiet 10 seconds. Madeline watched his profile. A muscle in his jaw clenched. Just once. When he finally turned his gaze back to her, the quiet intensity had been replaced by something sharp and cold. He leaned in slightly. "Who is the man across the street?" Madeline's blood ran cold. "What? I don't know what you mean. There's lots of people. The one in the gray hoodie, under the shelter? The one who hasn't taken his eyes off you for the last 5 minutes." His voice was low, almost conversational, but it held an edge that made her want to step back. "I don't know him," she lied, and the word tasted like ash. "He's just some guy." "He's been out there since I pulled up," Luca said. "He's not waiting for a bus. He's waiting for you. Please," she whispered. Humiliated and terrified, she hated this, hated him seeing it, hated the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle he was determined to solve. He's nobody. He's harmless. Luca's eyes narrowed. He looked at her, truly looked at her, at the dark circles under her eyes, the tremble she was trying to hide in her hands, the desperation. "No," he said, his voice flat. "He's not." He took his coffee and his change, but he didn't leave. He went to his usual back booth. He sat and watched the street. He was still there when Darren finally, impatiently, flicked his cigarette into the gutter and slouched away, disappearing around the corner. Only then did Luca stand up, place his empty cup on the counter, and leave without another word. The next day. She felt him before she saw him. He came in during the lunch rush, a time he normally avoided. He stood in line, a stark, dark suit in a sea of college students and office workers. When he got to the counter, he didn't order. He just looked at her. "What is it you want?" she asked, her voice strained. Rosie was watching them from the pastry case. "I want you to be safe." He slid something across the counter. It was not a $20 bill. It was a card. Small, black, and made of such thick, heavy stock it felt more like a sliver of stone. The paper was matte, but the lettering on it was a deep, embossed gloss. There was no name, just a 10-digit phone number, and below it, 2 initials, LM. "If he touches you," Luca said, his voice a low command that cut through the noise of the cafe. "If he even looks at you again, you call that number." She stared at the card. It felt like a brand. "I can't. It's not a request. Madeline." He turned and walked out. The line of people stared after him. Rosie immediately appeared at her side. "Okay, who's that guy, and what did he give you? Was that his number?" Madeline quickly slipped the card into her apron pocket. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "He's just a customer. Rosie, just a customer." That night, she held the card in her small apartment. The weight of it seemed to press all the air out of the room. It was a promise of help, but she knew. better than anyone. What help from men really cost. It brought the memories back, sharp and acidic. Darren had not been a monster at first. That was his trick. He had been all smiles and sunshine, the guy who showed up at the diner where she used to work with a single, perfect rose. He'd told her she was too good for that place. He'd said her smile was the only thing that got him through the day. He'd charmed her. She'd been 22, and so stupid. The charm had given way to isolation. You don't need to see your friends, Maddie. They don't get us. Then, why are you working so much? I'm here. I can take care of you. Then came the control. He'd check her phone, demanding to know who Mike was. It was her cousin. He'd time her trips to the grocery store. What took you so long? Were you talking to someone? He'd made her world small, until it contained only him. And once he was the only thing in it, he'd started to break it. It started with a shove. You made me do that. Maddie, you know I hate it when you argue. It escalated to a gripped arm, his fingers biting into her skin, leaving bruises she had to cover with long sleeves in the summer. And then, the night she left. He'd been drunk, raging about money, about her, about the world. He had accused her of looking at the mailman, and he had hit her. A full, open-palmed slap that sent her reeling, her ear ringing, the taste of blood in her mouth. She had stared at him, her reflection staring back at her from his blank, furious eyes, and she'd felt nothing but cold, sharp clarity. She had waited. She'd waited 4 more hours, cleaning up the broken glass from the plate he'd thrown, icing her cheek, pretending to forgive him. She had let him paw at her, whispering his sloppy, beery apologies. She'd waited until he was asleep, snoring, a dead weight in her bed. Then she'd taken the duffel bag she'd packed 3 months prior, the one hidden under a loose floorboard. She'd taken the $600 in cash she'd skimmed from their grocery money, $1 at a time. She had left her phone, her keys, her entire life. She had walked to the bus station and bought a one-way ticket to the farthest place the cash would take her, New York. She had not been Madeline Reyes for a long time. She'd been a Maddie girl. She'd been his baby. She'd been a victim. Now, she was just Madeline, and she was a survivor. Survivors did not call mysterious men on black business cards. Survivors handled their own problems. They hid, they ran, and they never, ever trusted anyone. She hid the card in the back of her drawer, under the burner phone. A few nights later, she walked out of the cafe into a damp, chilling fog. The streetlights were hazy, and the street was empty. She pulled her thin coat tight, fearing a familiar knot in her stomach. A black sedan was parked across the street, its engine silent, its lights off. It was just a car, but it was his car. She knew it. A figure stepped out of the fog-shrouded alleyway next to her building. Not Darren, Luca. She stopped, her heart lurching into her throat. "What are you doing here?" "Waiting." He stepped into the light. He was not in a suit. He was in dark jeans and a black Henley that stretched across his shoulders, making him look less like a businessman and more like something raw and dangerous. "You're scaring me," she said, and it was the truth. "He's not the only one who can watch. Madeline, how did you know my name?" she'd asked him before, her name tag. But this felt different. "Darren Voss," he said, his voice flat, ignoring her question. "Petty theft at 16, assault at 21. Did 18 months for aggravated battery. He's got a taste for it. He's also got a habit of running his mouth." Madeline was rooted to the spot. The fog swirled around her ankles. "How do you know that? Have you been investigating me? Following me?" The old fear was back, but now it was mixed with a hot, sharp anger. It was the same feeling, the control, the observation. It was Darren all over again, just in a more expensive package. "You have no right," she spat, her voice shaking. "You don't know me. You don't get to look into my life. Stay away from me." She tried to push past him, but he didn't move. He was a wall. "You're right. I don't know you," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying a weight that stopped her cold. "But I know him. Or rather, I know who he's working with. He's a nobody. He's a nobody who just found a new, very dangerous friend. He's been spending a lot of time with the Di Castro family. The name meant nothing to Madeline. She just stared at him. Luca sighed, a small, impatient sound. The Di Castros are not good people. They're rivals, and they like to find weaknesses. He looked her straight in the eye, and she finally understood. They think he's your weakness, and they're trying to make you my weakness. She was shaking her head, a denial. That's insane. You and we're nothing. I will serve you coffee. It doesn't matter. It's what they perceive. He looked at her, and the coldness in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of something else. Regret. Maybe. He's not just a violent ex, Madeline. He's a pawn in a game you know nothing about, and he just put you on the board. This was too much. The past, the present, the hidden, violent city she had stumbled into. It all crashed down on her. She fumbled in her pocket, her hands shaking so violently she couldn't get her keys out. A sob, hot and frustrated, escaped her. I can't do this. She finally got the keys out, but she was trembling too hard to find the lock. She felt his presence as he stepped closer. He didn't crowd her, but he was there, blocking her from the street, from the fog, gently. He reached out. His hand closed over hers. His skin was warm, his palm calloused, his grip impossibly steady. He covered her hand, keys and all, and just held it against the door. He didn't try to take the keys. He didn't try to touch her. He just held her. He was a human anchor in the middle of her storm. The simple, non-sexual contact was so foreign, so powerful, it stopped her breathing. It was not the possessive, bruising grip of Darren. It was not the casual, dismissive touch of a customer. It was solid. It was reassurance, offered in silence. She looked up at him. His face was inches from hers. She could see the lines at the corners of his dark eyes, the small scar that cut through his left eyebrow. He was watching her, and he wasn't just seeing a victim. He was seeing her. She didn't pull away. She leaned into that small, solid point of contact, and for the first time in days, she took a full, deep breath. After a long, silent moment, he slowly, deliberately, released his hand. He stepped back, giving her space. He won't get to you, Lucas said. And it was not a reassurance. It was a vow. She watched him walk back to his car, get in, and drive away. His engine a low, throaty rumble that faded into the fog. She let herself into her apartment and engaged all 3 locks. But she knew, as she stood in the dark, that her cheap deadbolts were not what was keeping the world at bay. Later that night, in a penthouse apartment high above the city, Luca Moretti stood in front of a wall of glass looking down at the lights of Brooklyn. He thought of her small, terrified face. He thought of her flimsy locks and the graffiti in her lobby. He thought of the way she'd trembled and the way she'd stopped when he'd held her hand. He picked up his phone. "Angelo," he said. I need someone in a building in Brooklyn. All night, every night. A girl lives there. Her name is Madeline." "Yes, that's the one. I want eyes on the building. I want to know everyone who goes in and everyone who comes out. There's a piece of trash named Voss. If he gets within 10 feet of that door, you handle it, and you make sure she never even knows you were there." Meanwhile, 3 blocks away in the dark, cold lobby of Madeline's building, the lock on the front door clicked softly. It had been pathetically easy to pick. Darren Voss slipped inside, the smell of bleach and old garbage hitting his nose. He looked at the flimsy mailboxes, at the stairs. He could go up, knock on her door. He could make her scream. No, not yet. He tucked himself into the deep, dark shadows of the stairwell, a space under the first-floor landing that was filled with old mops and discarded newspapers. He sat down, the concrete cold against his back. He pulled a small pocket knife from his jeans, flicked it open. The blade caught a tiny slime of moonlight from the dirty window. He smiled, and he began to clean his fingernails, listening to the old building groan and waiting for the sound of her footsteps on the stairs in the morning. She slept in her clothes, her back against the door, a heavy kitchen knife in her hand. Sleep did not come. There was only the sound of the old building settling, the distant wail of sirens, and the frantic, rabbit-fast beat of her own heart. When the first gray light of morning finally bled through her dirty window, she felt not relief, but a sickening dread. It was 5:45 in the morning, time to go to work. She could not call in sick. She needed the money. She needed the routine. If she stayed here, in this room, he would have won. He would have turned her apartment into another prison. She checked the peephole. The hallway was empty. She undid the 3 locks, her hands shaking, the knife still clutched in her right hand, hidden in the folds of her coat. She opened the door, a crack at a time. Silence. She slipped into the hallway, her sneakers silent on the worn carpet. She took the stairs. The elevator was a trap, a metal box she could not escape. The stairwell was concrete and cold, echoing with the drip of a leaky pipe on the floor above. It smelled of mildew and dust. She was halfway down the first flight when he stepped out from under the landing. The smell hit her first, stale cigarettes and the sweet, sickly scent of cheap whiskey. "Maddie girl," Darren hissed, his smile a row of yellowed teeth in the gloom. "You're not very happy to see me." She recoiled, stumbling back up a step. The knife was in her hand, but her arm felt like lead. He was there. He was real. This was not a nightmare. "You look like crap, baby," he said, taking a step toward her. He was enjoying this. The fear rolling off her was a perfume to him. "This city life ain't treating you right. You should have just stayed with me." "Get away from me," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "Get away?" He laughed, a short, barking sound that bounced off the concrete walls. "I just got here. I came all this way. Just for you. You're mine. Maddie, you always were." He lunged for her, his hand reaching for her arm. It was the lunge that did it, the familiar, possessive grab, the past, the present, all her fear. It all coalesced into a single point of white-hot rage. She did not scream. She roared. She swung her left hand, not the one with the knife, but her free hand, in a wide, desperate arc. The sound of her palm connecting with his face was a sharp crack, like a gunshot in the narrow space. It echoed. His head snapped to the side. There was a moment of stunned silence. He touched his cheek, a red welt already rising. His eyes, when they turned back to her, were no longer amused. They were black with murder. "You little—" She didn't wait. She turned and fled and met him scrambling up the stairs, back toward her floor, but she was clumsy with panic. He was faster. He grabbed the back of her coat, pulling her off balance. She fell against the railing, the knife skittering from her grasp, clattering down the steps to the landing below. She was defenseless. "You're going to regret that," he snarled, pulling her toward him. She clawed at his hand, her nails digging into his skin, and she kicked, her foot connecting with his shin. He cursed, his grip tightening. She was losing. She screamed, a high, thin sound of pure terror, and shoved him with all her might. He stumbled back, surprised by her ferocity, his foot slipping on the knife. It was just enough. She ripped her coat from his grasp, the cheap fabric tearing, and bolted down the stairs, past him, taking the steps 2, 3 at a time. She did not look back. She could hear him pounding down the stairs behind her, his heavy boots slamming the concrete, his voice a stream of filth. She burst through the stairwell door into the lobby, her lungs on fire. She fumbled with the lobby door lock, her fingers slipping. She could hear him in the stairwell, yanking the door. The lock gave way. She threw herself out onto the sidewalk, into the cold morning air, and collided with a wall of black wool and solid muscle. Hands, strong and steady, gripped her arms, stopping her from falling. She looked up, her vision blurred with tears and panic. Luca Moretti. He was standing on the sidewalk, his black car parked at the curb, the engine still humming. His face was a mask of cold fury. He was not looking at her. He was looking over her shoulder, at the lobby door as it flew open. Darren burst out onto the steps, his face purple with rage. "Get back here! You—" He stopped, his words dying in his throat. He saw her, and then he saw the man who was holding her. He saw the car. He saw the suit. His predator's instinct, finely honed, screamed at him. Luca released her, pushing her gently behind him. He did not raise his voice. He did not run. He simply moved, in 2 long, silent strides. He was on Darren. He grabbed the front of Darren's hoodie with one hand, bunching the material, and slammed him against the brick wall of her building. The impact sent a cloud of brick dust into the air. Luca was tall, but he lifted Darren effortlessly until Darren's toes were dangling 6 inches off the pavement. Darren's eyes bulged. He clawed at the hand that held him, but it was like trying to move granite. Luca leaned in, his voice not a shout, but a low, terrifying rumble that Madeline could feel from 10 feet away. "I do not know who you are," Luca said, his voice a blade of ice, "but you just made the last mistake you will ever make." I don't know her," Darren choked, his face turning a blotchy red. "You will forget her name," Luca said, his voice dropping even lower. He pressed Darren harder against the wall, a small, choked gasp escaping Darren's lips. "You will forget her face. You will forget this address. If you ever come within 5 miles of her again, if you think her name, I will find you, and I will unmake you. Do you understand me?" He gave Darren a single, violent shake, like a dog with a rat. "Do you understand?" Darren, sobbing for air, nodded frantically, his hands splayed in surrender. Luca looked at him for 1 more second, his eyes black with a coldness that chilled Madeline to the bone. Then he opened his hand. Darren collapsed to the sidewalk in a heap, coughing and sputtering. He didn't wait. He scrambled to his feet, all his bravado gone, and he ran. He ran, half tripping, and disappeared around the corner. There was silence. There was only the sound of the car engine, the distant traffic, and Madeline's own ragged, tearing breaths. Luca turned. His face was still hard, but the murderous rage was gone, banked like a fire. He looked at her torn coat, her tear-streaked face, the red marks on her neck where Darren's hand had grazed her. He said nothing. He simply took her arm, his touch surprisingly gentle, and turned her back toward the building. "No," she whispered, her knees threatening to buckle. "I can't. Not in there. He is gone. He will not be back." His voice was absolute. He led her inside, back through the lobby. He paused, looked at the knife on the landing, then at her. He said nothing. He just led her up the stairs, all the way to her door. He waited while she fumbled with her keys, her entire body shaking in the aftermath of the adrenaline. She got the door open, stumbled inside, and only then did she realize he had followed her. He stood in her small, sad room, filling it with his presence. He looked at the cot on the floor. He looked at the single pot in the sink. He looked at the locks on her door. He locked the deadbolt. He fastened the chain. He slid the security bar into place, and then he turned to her. It was the finality of it, the click of the last lock, the sight of him. A solid, immovable object in her space, a space that had been violated. The adrenaline fled, and in its place came the crushing, black wave of trauma. A sob tore from her, a raw, animal sound. Her legs gave out. She didn't fall. He was there. He caught her, his arms wrapping around her as she collapsed, pulling her against his chest. She shattered. She wept. She clung to the lapels of his expensive coat, her fists bunching the material, and she sobbed for everything. For fear, for the slap, for the 2 years of running, for the terror of that morning. She cried until her throat was raw and she had no air. And he just held her. He didn't shush her. He didn't pat her on the back. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He stood, solid as an oak, his arms a secure cage, and he let her break. One of his hands came up to the back of her head, his fingers spreading wide, holding her skull, protecting her, as if to say, "It is all right, you can let go. I have you." It went on for minutes. When the storm finally, agonizingly, subsided, she was left limp, her face buried in his chest, her breath coming in hiccuping gasps. His shirt was damp with her tears. She was so embarrassed. She pulled back, her hands still weakly holding his coat. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, wiping her face. "Your coat. It does not matter." His voice was low, and for the first time, she heard something in it besides command. It was rough, unsteady. She looked up at him. His dark eyes were fixed on her, and there was a storm in them she did not understand. He was too close. The smell of him, wool, and something clean and masculine, like soap and steel, was all around her. He had saved her. He had held her. He had not hurt her. It was too much. It was gratitude. It was terror. It was a desperate, aching need to replace the violence of Darren's touch with something, anything else. Before she could think, before she could second guess, she rose up on her toes, grabbed his face with her trembling hands, and kissed him. It was a bad kiss. It was desperate, clumsy and wet with tears, her lips smashed against his, her teeth clicking his. It was all panic and gratitude and a hopeless plea. He did not move. He did not respond. He simply stood there, a statue, letting her press her frantic, broken kiss against his mouth. She realized what she was doing. Mortified, her face burning, she ripped herself away from him, staggering back. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. I'm so sorry. I don't know why. He stopped her frantic apologies. He raised one hand. His expression was impossible to read, but his eyes were dark and intense, and he had not moved. He stepped toward her. She flinched, but she did not retreat. He stopped, just inches away. He looked at her swollen lips, her terrified eyes. Then, very slowly, he reached out, not to grab her, but with an open palm, his thumb, rough and calloused, brushed the line of her cheekbone, wiping away a fresh tear. "Don't apologize," he said, his voice rough. "But not like this." She stared at him, confused. "I am not him," he said, his thumb still tracing the tear track, a touch so gentle it made her want to weep again. "I will not take advantage of your fear, and I will not be a stand-in for your gratitude. When you kiss me, Madeline, it will be for a different reason." He held her gaze, and in that moment, she understood. He was not Darren. He was not a man who took. He was a man who, for his own reasons, waited. He was giving her back a power she hadn't even realized she'd lost. He was seeing her, not as a victim, but as a woman. The next evening, her regular phone rang. She had not left her apartment. He had made calls, a series of low, quiet conversations in Italian. A different, older man had shown up with 3 bags of groceries and a new deadbolt, which he had installed in perfect silence. She answered the phone. "Luca, I'm having dinner at my home tonight," he said. No greeting. "I'm sending a car for you at 7. He will be downstairs." It was not a question. But after yesterday, it did not feel like a command. It felt like an anchor. "Okay," she said. The car was a black Mercedes, and the driver did not speak. It drove her across the bridge, into Manhattan, to a skyscraper of gleaming black glass. A private elevator opened directly into his apartment. It was vast. The walls were all windows, the city a carpet of diamonds below. The furniture was minimal, expensive and dark. It was the most beautiful and the loneliest room she had ever seen. He was standing by the window. He was not in a suit. He was in dark pants and a soft, gray cashmere sweater. He looked human. "You came," he said. "You said you were sending a car," she replied, finding a small smile. He did not smile back, but his eyes softened. "Are you hungry?" He had not ordered in. He had cooked a simple pasta, a salad. They ate at a massive wooden table, in a silence that was not awkward but full. After, he took her hand. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." He led her not to a bedroom, but to a staircase she hadn't seen. It led up. The air grew cooler, damper. He opened a heavy steel door, and they were on the roof. There was no pool. There was no party deck. It was a garden. In dozens of deep, cedar-planked boxes, there was a jungle. Tomato vines, heavy with green fruit, rows and rows of herbs, rosemary, basil, thyme, their scent sharp in the cool night air. There were peppers and lettuce, and in the center, a gnarled, defiant olive tree. She walked to the olive tree, touching its silvery leaf. This is the last thing I expected. My grandfather grew tomatoes on a fire escape in Sicily," he said, his voice quiet, coming from behind her. "He used to say it was the only way to keep the sky from crushing you, the only thing that smelled like home." She turned to him. He was looking at the garden, his profile sharp against the glittering skyline. For the first time, she saw a crack in the armor. She saw a flicker of the boy he had been. "You're lonely," she said, and the words were out before she could stop them. He turned his head slowly, his dark eyes meeting hers. He did not deny it. "I am." "Careful." She stepped closer to him. The night was soft, the city noise a distant hum. This was his space. This was his truth. He had shown her his, and she had shown him hers. "Thank you," she whispered, "for yesterday, for this. I told you he would not touch you again." "You did." She reached up, her hand slower this time. She did not grab his face. She placed her fingers on the collar of his sweater, feeling the warmth of his skin underneath. He did not move. He just watched her. His breath held. "Madeline," he said, his voice a warning. "It's not gratitude," she whispered, "and I'm not scared, not of you." She rose up on her toes, and this time, she was not clumsy. She pressed her lips to his. It was soft. It was a question. He did not move for a second, and then, with a low sound deep in his chest, he answered. His mouth was not hard, but it was firm. He did not take. He met. His hand came up, not to her head, but to her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin, just as it had before. He let her lead, let her set the pace. It was slow and deep, and it was the first real kiss of her entire life. It was not enough. She pressed closer, her other hand coming up to his shoulder. She was hungry for this gentleness, this strength. The kiss deepened, his tongue brushed her lips, asking for entry, and she gave it, a small gasp escaping her. His other hand found the small of her back, his fingers spreading wide, pulling her flesh against him. She could feel the hard wall of his chest, the thud of his heart, or maybe it was hers. The kiss was no longer tender. It was raw, and it was needy, and it was everything she had been missing. She gasped against his mouth, her fingers tightening in his sweater. They broke apart, both of them breathing hard. His eyes were black, his pupils dilated. His hand was still on her back, a possessive, grounding weight. He looked at her, his chest rising and falling. The desire between them was a thick, heavy thing, a physical presence in the night air. But he held back. She saw him do it. She saw the iron control he exerted, the respect he was still, even now, giving her. He took her hand, his palm warm and rough against hers, and led her to the edge of the roof, overlooking the city. He did not look at the view. He looked at her. "As long as I'm breathing, Madeline," he said, his voice a raw, new vow. "No one will hurt you again." Darren Voss did not disappear. He was a cockroach, and Luca's stomp on the sidewalk had only sent him scurrying back into the darkest cracks of the city. And in those cracks, he found new friends. Luca sat in his office, the lights of Manhattan glittering like a cold, indifferent ocean 1,000 feet below. The glass in his hand was empty, but he did not refill it. Angelo, his most trusted captain, stood across the desk, his face grim. "It was the Dicastros, boss, no question. They hit the transport at the Red Hook crossing. It was sloppy, but it was loud. They wanted us to know." "How many?" Luca's voice was flat. "2 of our men are in the hospital. Sal has a broken arm. Vinny took a bullet in the shoulder. They'll be fine. But the shipment is gone." Luca's jaw tightened. It was not about the money. It was about the message. And Darren Voss? Angelo looked disgusted. That piece of filth was there. Sal saw him. He was running his mouth, yelling. The Dicastros are using him like a cheap attack dog. He's telling them everything. About the girl. About the cafe. He's the one who gave them the route. There it was. The lever. The weakness they thought they had found. They were using Darren to poke at Luca, and they were using Madeline's name as the stick. "He's bragging," Angelo continued, his voice laced with contempt, "telling anyone who will listen that the girl is his, and that he's going to take her back. He thinks she's your woman, boss, and he thinks taking her is how he gets respect." Luca stood, the chair scraping back on the marble floor. The rage was a cold, clean thing inside him, a razor's edge. His promise on the roof had not been a romantic whisper. It had been a vow, and the DiCastros had just spit on it. "Double the guard on my father's house," Luca commanded. "And get my sister out of the city. I want her in Miami by morning. This is over, and I want him—" DiCastro or the boy? Both. He left Angelo to clean up the mess and went to find Madeline. He had not let her return to her apartment, not even for clothes. He had sent one of his house staff, a quiet woman in her 50s, to retrieve whatever Madeline had of value. She was now a resident of his penthouse, a bird in a gilded cage. He found her in the kitchen. She'd been there for 3 days, wandering the vast, silent apartment like a ghost. She was wiping down a counter that was already immaculate. She wore a pair of his gray sweatpants, rolled at the waist, and one of his T-shirts. They swallowed her. She looked 12 years old. "You have to stop cleaning," he said, his voice softer than he intended. She jumped, her hand going to her chest. She'd not heard him approach. It gives me something to do. I feel useless here. Luca, you are not here to be useful. You are here to be safe." He saw the guilt flash in her eyes. She knew. She felt the tension radiating from him and had seen the hushed, angry meetings with men like Angelo. "What happened?" she whispered. He did not believe in lying to her. "Not about this. An ambush. Some of my men were hurt." Her face went pale. "Because of me." "No." He stepped closer, his voice firm. "Because of me. Because of my name. And my business. Darren is a tool. The DiCastro family is the hand that holds him. This is not your fault, Madeline. But it is your problem, and mine. What do they want? They want to prove I am weak. They want to prove that what I care about, they can take." He saw the old fear return, the one he had tried to banish. She was thinking of running again. He could see it in the way her eyes darted toward the door. "Even from this height, you cannot go back to your apartment," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You are not safe there. They know the building. They know the cafe. They know your life. Here, they cannot touch you. But your men," she choked. "People are getting hurt, Luca, because I am here. Maybe I should just disappear. I'm good at it." "No." He gripped her shoulders, his fingers firm, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You ran from him once, and he found you. You run from me, and he will find you again, and I will not be there to stop him. You are safer here, in the heart of the storm, than you are anywhere else. I will not let them touch you." She searched his face, her eyes wide with a terrible, helpless guilt. "This is a prison," she whispered. "It is a fortress," he replied. "And you are not the prisoner. You are what I am protecting." She finally, reluctantly nodded. He could feel the tension drain from her, replaced by a weary resignation. She was so tired of fighting. He hated this. He hated seeing her trapped. He wanted to give her back the world he had inadvertently taken from her. The days that followed were thick with a strange, domestic tension. Luca was at war. He was on the phone constantly, his voice a low, angry murmur of Italian, or in meetings in his office, the sound of men's voices, sharp and combative. And in the middle of this, there was Madeline. She refused to be idle. She explored the apartment, finding the library, second kitchen, and gym. She organized his pantry. She learned how to use the complex, terrifying espresso machine. She started to cook. One evening, he came out of his office at 10 in the evening, his head pounding, his eyes burning with exhaustion. The apartment was quiet, but something was different. The smell, not the sterile scent of lemon polish, but garlic, basil, and tomatoes. He found her in the kitchen, asleep at the massive marble island, her head resting on her arms, a cookbook open beside her. On the stove, a pot of sauce was simmering, and a pan of baked ziti was cooling. He stood for a long moment, just watching her. She looked impossibly small in his vast, cold world. She had made him dinner. No one had made him dinner in a decade. He touched her shoulder, gently. "Madeline," she jerked awake, her eyes wide and disoriented. "Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for you. I made you food." He looked at the pan. "I see that. You haven't been eaten," she said, her voice shy, as if she had been caught doing something wrong. He pulled out a stool and sat. "Serve me." She did. They ate in the kitchen, in silence. At almost 11 o'clock at night, the food was simple, and it was the best thing he had ever tasted. Their lives fell into this strange rhythm. The war raged outside, but inside, they built a small, fragile peace. She brought him coffee in the mornings, and her fingers would brush him. A jolt would pass between them, sharp and surprising, and they would both pull back, their eyes meeting for a second too long. One night, he found her in the main living room, staring out at the city, the only light coming from the millions of windows below. Music was playing, a soft old song with a mournful saxophone. He had not even known the sound system was on. He stood in the doorway, watching her. She was wrapped in a cashmere blanket, a small, lonely figure against the skyline. He walked to her. He did not say a word. He just held out his hand. She looked at his hand and then at his face. Tentatively, she placed her small, warm hand in his. He pulled her to her feet. He drew her close, one hand on her back, the other holding hers, and they began to move. It was not a dance. It was just swaying. Two people, holding on in the dark, with the city as their witness. He rested his cheek against her hair, breathing in the scent of her. Shampoo and basil. He felt the tension of the last week, the rage, the strategic maneuvering, all of it just melt away. There was only this, her soft and warm in his arms, her heart beating a quiet, steady rhythm against his. He wanted to stay there, in that moment, forever. The sabotage happened 3 nights later. It was not a storm. It was precise. At 2:17 in the morning, a junction box in the basement of the building was compromised. Madeline was in the guest suite he had given her, down the hall from his own. Luca was in his office, unable to sleep, reviewing security schematics. The click of the lights going out was almost silent, but it was total. The power grid, the backup generators, the emergency lighting, everything dead. The high-tech building was plunged into an ancient, primal darkness. The silence was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket. He was on his feet in an instant, his hand already on the gun he kept taped beneath his desk. But he knew this was not that kind of attack. This was an inconvenience. This was a message. We can get to you. We can cut you off. Then he thought of her. He moved through the pitch-black apartment by memory, his bare feet silent on the marble. He reached her door. "Madeline?" Silence. He pushed the door open. "Madeline." He heard it. A small, hitched sound. A gasp. A whimper. She was in the corner. He could sense her. A small, terrified knot of energy. "It's me, Luca." He heard her scrambling. A small cry. "No, no, no, please." She was not there. She was not in his penthouse. She was back in the dark. Back in a closet. Back in the stairwell. He had not understood. The darkness was her trigger. It was a monster. "Madeline. It is me. It is Luca. You are safe." He fumbled for his phone in his pocket, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, and it was a mistake. She screamed. She was huddled in the corner between the wall and the dresser, her knees drawn to her chest, her hands over her head, her whole body shaking violently. The light had only terrified her more. He clicked it off, plunging them back into darkness. "I am turning the light off," he said, his voice low and calm. "I am here. I am not him. I am going to light a candle. It is just me." He moved to the dresser, where he knew she kept a decorative candle. He used his lighter. A small, hesitant flame sparked, and then there was light. It was soft, flickering and warm. It pushed the shadows back, and it illuminated her. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face, her eyes squeezed shut. "Madalena," he said, his voice rough. He never used the full name. Her eyes snapped open. She saw him, not the monster, not Darren, just Luca, kneeling on the floor, his face illuminated by the single soft flame. It was so dark," she whispered, her voice a child's. "I know. I am here. It is over." He lit more candles, the ones from the bathroom, from the living room, until her entire room was filled with a soft, flickering, warm glow. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall, 10 feet away from her. He did not approach. He did not crowd her. He just watched. She uncurled, slowly. Her sobs subsided. She watched him, this large, dangerous man, sitting on her floor, lighting candles to chase away her nightmares. She crawled across the floor, not like a victim, but like a woman, making a choice. She stopped, kneeling in front of him. The flickering light played over her face, over the tears still wet on her cheeks. He watched her, his face a mask of iron control, but his eyes were full of a raw, aching tenderness she had never seen. This was the moment. The tension of the last weeks, the dance, the fear, the shared meals, the quiet touches, it all pulled tight. A string that was about to snap. She reached out, her hand still shaking, and touched his face. His skin was rough with stubble and warm. He did not move. He just watched her. He was giving her the choice. She leaned in, and she kissed him. It was not the desperate, grateful, clumsy kiss of her apartment. This was slow. This was intentional. This was a claim. He responded, his mouth meeting hers, not with force, but with a deep, patient hunger. He had been waiting for this. His hand came up, his fingers burying in her hair, his other hand finding her waist, pulling her closer. He deepened the kiss, and it was everything. It was safe. It was dangerous. It was the storm, and it was the harbor. He pulled back, just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. "Madeline," he whispered, and it was not a name. It was a vow. She unbuttoned his shirt. His jacket, his armor, was already gone. This was the man underneath. Her lips trailed from his jaw, down his throat, to the hollow of his collarbone. She felt his heart hammer under her mouth. He smelled of soap and smoke and the clean, masculine scent of him. He stood, lifting her with him as if she weighed nothing. He did not carry her to the bed. He carried her to the thick rug in front of the windows, laying her down in the pool of candlelight, the city lights far below, the only witnesses. He shed his shirt, his body a map of lean muscle and old scars in the flickering light. He was beautiful, and he was terrifying, and he was hers. He came down over her, his touch reverent. His hands traced the line of her body, from her shoulders, down her arms, over her ribs, his fingers spreading wide over her stomach. He was not rushing. He was memorizing. This was not the bruising, selfish, angry touch of her past. This was a question. This was a prayer. His mouth found hers again, slow and deep. It was not a taking. It was a trade. She met his strength not with surrender, but with her own. Every touch, every kiss, was a rewriting of her past, a reclamation. It was slow and emotional, and when he finally whispered her name against her skin, it felt like a benediction. Later, tangled in a cashmere blanket in front of the dying candles, she lay her head on his chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. The fear was gone. The darkness was gone. There was only the warmth of his skin and the solid, immovable weight of his arm around her. "I'm not afraid when I'm with you," she whispered to his heart. He was quiet for a long time. His hand stroked her hair. He kissed her temple. "Then stay with me," he said, his voice a low rumble. "For real?" She looked up at him. She saw the question in his eyes. This was not about safety. This was not about protection. This was about staying. She nodded, a slow, sure movement. Yes, but far away, in a dimly lit bar in a part of the city she had run from. Darren Voss was not watching the news. He was watching the clock. He was looking at an old photo of her on his cracked phone. He had been humiliated. The DiCastros were finished with him. He was a laughingstock. He needed her. He needed to prove she was his. He knew her. He knew she would not be able to stay in that tower forever. She was a creature of habit. She loved that stupid, dirty cafe. She had friends there. She had routines. He sat in the dark, nursing a warm beer, a new, vicious plan forming in his mind. He would wait. He would watch the cafe. And when she came back, just once, to retrieve the last piece of her old life, he would be there. And this time, there would be no Mafia boss to save her. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, suspended above the city like a cloud. But to Madeline, it had begun to feel like a gilded cage. It was not the luxury that stifled her. It was the silence. Luca had been gone since dawn, pulled away by the escalating war that Darren's foolishness had ignited. The guards at the door were stone-faced statues, polite but immovable. Madeline paced the living room, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. In her haste to leave her apartment, in the chaos of the ambush and the extraction, she had left the one thing that mattered. It wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. It was a small, battered tin box hidden beneath the floorboard of her closet. Inside was a photograph of her mother, the only one she had, and the silver locket her grandmother had pressed into her palm the day she died. They were talismans. They were proof that she had existed before Darren, before the fear. Without them, she felt unmoored, drifting in Luca's world without an anchor of her own. It was a Tuesday. The cafe would be busy. The lunch rush provided cover. She told herself she would be in and out in 10 minutes. She told herself that Darren was likely sleeping off a drunk or bragging to his new friends in some dark basement, nowhere near the Café Siena. She waited until the shift change of the guards. It was a narrow window, a gap in the armor she had observed over the last few days. She slipped out through the service elevator, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. When she hit the street, the air felt colder than she remembered, sharp with the scent of coming snow. She hailed a cab, keeping her head down, her scarf wrapped high. The ride to Brooklyn was a blur of gray asphalt and rising panic. Why was she doing this? Luca would be furious, but the thought of that tin box, sitting alone in the dark, vulnerable to Darren's looting hands, pushed her forward. The Café Siena was humming. The smell of roasted beans and burnt sugar hit her like a memory of a former life. She slipped in through the back entrance, the one the staff used. Her key still worked. She moved quickly to the employee locker room. It was empty. She knelt by her old locker, worked the combination with trembling fingers, and popped it open. There, tucked in the back behind her spare apron, was the tin box. She hadn't left it at the apartment. She had brought it here for safekeeping days ago and forgotten. Relief, hot and dizzying, washed over her. She grabbed the box, shoving it deep into her bag. She had it. She was safe. She turned to leave, pushing through the swinging door into the alleyway that ran behind the shop. It was a shortcut to the main street, a path she had taken 1,000 times. The alley was narrow, shadowed by the looming brick walls of the tenements. Damp cardboard boxes were stacked against the dumpsters. She took 2 steps and froze. A figure detached itself from the wall. He was not wearing a hoodie today. He was wearing a leather jacket that looked too new, too expensive. Bought with money that wasn't his. Darren, he didn't look surprised. He looked satisfied. "I told them," he said, his voice an oily slide of sound in the quiet alley. "I told them you're a creature of habit. Maddie, you always come back for your trash." Madeline stepped back, her hand clutching her bag. The door to the cafe was behind her, but he was closer. "Get away from me, Darren!" Her voice was stronger than she felt, sharpened by the time she had spent with Luca. "Is that how you talk to me now?" He stepped closer, his boots crunching on the wet gravel. His eyes were bloodshot, manic. "After everything I did for you, I made you, Madeline. I picked you up from nothing." "You tried to destroy me," she said, backing up until her shoulders hit the cold brick of the cafe wall. "I loved you," he shouted, the sound echoing off the buildings. "And you ran off to play whore for some Italian suit." He lunged. It was fast, desperate. His hand clamped around her upper arm, his fingers digging into the bruise he had left years ago, ghost memories layering over present pain. He dragged her away from the door, spinning her around, slamming her back against the dumpster. The smell of him, stale beer, sweat, and cheap cologne, filled her nose, making her gag. "You think he cares about you?" Darren hissed, leaning his face close to hers. "You're nothing to him, a pet, but to me, you're everything. You belong to me, Madeline. You always have." He shook her, his grip bruising. "Say it. Say you belong to me." Madeline looked into his eyes, the eyes of the man who had haunted her nightmares for 2 years. She saw the weakness there, the pathetic, grasping need for control. "No," she whispered. He raised his hand, his face twisting into a snarl of rage. "You belong to me." "Not anymore." The voice did not come from Madeline. It came from the mouth of the alley, low and lethal. Darren froze. He spun Madeline around, using her as a shield, his arm hooking around her neck. Luca Moretti stood 10 feet away. He was not wearing his suit jacket. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his chest heaving slightly as if he had been running. In his right hand, a gun was leveled at the center of Darren's forehead. The metal was steady, an extension of his arm. Luca's face was terrifying. It was devoid of all emotion, a mask of pure, cold calculation. But his eyes were burning. "Let her go," Luca said. The command was quiet, barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a tombstone. "You shoot me? She goes down with me," Darren screamed, his voice cracking. He was sweating now, the bravado melting away in the face of a true predator. He tightened his grip on Madeline's throat. She gasped, clawing at his arm. "I will not miss," Luca said, "and you will not take her with you. You are a small man making a very large mistake." "She's mine," Darren shrieked. "I saw her first." "She is not property." Luca stepped forward, the gun never wavering. "She is the woman who left you, and I am the man who is going to ensure you never follow her again." The moment stretched, tight as a piano wire. Madeline could feel Darren's heart thumping wildly against her back. She saw the shift in his eyes, the realization that he was not leaving this alley alive. If he played by the rules, Darren didn't surrender. He snapped. With a feral roar, he shoved Madeline forward with all his strength, throwing her toward Luca, and simultaneously reached into his waistband. Luca caught her with his left arm, swinging her behind him, his body instantly becoming a wall between her and the threat. He didn't fire. Madeline was too close to the line of fire. Darren lunged, a glimmer of steel in his hand, a knife, long, serrated, nasty. He didn't aim for Luca's chest. He aimed low, driving the blade toward Luca's stomach. Luca blocked the strike with his forearm, a sickening sound of impact, but Darren was fueled by desperate, meth-fueled adrenaline. He scrambled, grappling, driving his shoulder into Luca's chest. The gun skittered across the wet pavement. They crashed into the wall. It was brutal and ugly. This was not a movie fight. It was a struggle for survival. Fists connected with wet thuds. Luca drove a knee into Darren's midsection, doubling him over, but Darren slashed out blindly with the knife. Madeline screamed, seeing the blood bloom on Luca's white shirt, a long, red slash across his ribs. Luca didn't even flinch. He grabbed Darren's wrist, the one holding the knife, and twisted. There was an audible snap. Darren howled, the knife clattering to the ground. Luca drove a fist into Darren's jaw, a blow that snapped his head back. Then another, and another. Darren crumpled, sliding down the brick wall, leaving a smear of blood. Luca stood over him, breathing hard, his hand pressed to his side, blood seeping between his fingers. He raised his boot, ready to deliver a final, crushing stomp to Darren's throat. "Luca!" The shout came from the end of the alley. Tires screeched. 3 black SUVs swarmed the entrance. Doors flew open and men poured out. Angelo, armed with a shotgun, followed by 4 soldiers. They saw Luca bleeding. They saw Darren on the ground. Angelo didn't hesitate. He raised the shotgun, aiming it directly at Darren's heaving chest. I'll kill him right now, boss." Darren whimpered, curling into a ball. His broken wrist cradled against his chest. Luca looked at Darren. He looked at the pathetic, broken creature who had terrorized Madeline for years. Then he looked at Madeline. She was pressed against the dumpster, her eyes wide, terrified not of Darren, but of what Luca might do. Luca lowered his foot. He took a breath, wincing at the pain in his side. "No," Luca said. Angelo looked at him, confused. "Boss, he cut you. He touched her. Justice doesn't need to look like revenge." "Angelo," Luca said, his voice strained but steady. "Death is too easy for him. He wants to be a martyr. He wants to be a gangster who went down fighting." Luca walked over to Madeline, ignoring his bleeding side. He checked her face. his bloody hand hovering near her cheek but not touching it. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears spilling over. "You're bleeding." "I'm fine." He turned back to Angelo. "Bag him. The feds have been building a RICO case against the DiCastros for 2 years. They just need a witness who knows the low-level distribution. They need a rat. Give him to Agent Miller." Darren's eyes widened in horror. In their world, being a rat was a death sentence, but being handed to the feds by the Mafia meant prison, isolation, and a life looking over his shoulder in a concrete box. "Luca, please," Darren begged, realizing his fate. "Get him out of my sight," Luca commanded. As his men dragged a screaming Darren away, Luca's legs finally gave out. He stumbled, one knee hitting the pavement. "Luca!" Madeline was there instantly, catching him, her hands pressing over his on the wound. The blood was warm and sticky. "I am okay," he rasped, his face turning gray. "You're not okay," she sobbed. "We need a doctor. Now!" The ride to the private clinic was a blur of sirens and Angelo's frantic driving. Luca lost consciousness halfway there, his head lolling onto Madeline's shoulder. She held him, whispering to him, begging him to stay. The clinic was not a hospital. It was a converted brownstone on the Upper East Side. Quiet and discreet, they rushed him into surgery. Madeline sat in the waiting room for 3 hours. She was still wearing her coat, stained with his blood. She held the tin box in her lap, her knuckles white. When the doctor finally came out, an older man with kind eyes, he smiled. He lost blood, and the cut was deep. It missed the vital organs, but he needed 40 stitches. He's strong as an ox. He will be fine. Madeline let out a breath that felt like it had been held for a lifetime. They let her see him. The room was dimly lit, smelling of antiseptic and expensive flowers. Luca lay in the bed, his chest bandaged, an IV line running into his arm. He looked pale, but peaceful. She pulled a chair to the bedside. She took his hand, the one that wasn't hooked up to the machines. It was large and warm. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his knuckles. "I'm so sorry. Luca, I was so stupid. I needed the box. I didn't want him to take it." He didn't move. "You promised me no one would hurt me," she cried softly. "But you didn't promise you wouldn't get hurt. You can't do that. You can't die for me. I won't survive it." She kissed his hand, her tears wetting his skin. "I love you," she whispered. The words hung in the quiet air, terrifying and true. "I think I've loved you since you first walked me home. Please wake up." She sat there for another hour, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. "You are very loud when you think—" "Madalena—" Her head snapped up. Luca was watching her. His eyes were heavy-lidded, groggy from the anesthesia, but there was a distinct glint of amusement in them. "You heard me?" she gasped. "I heard the part about you being stupid, yes?" He rasped, his voice dry. He tried to shift, wincing. "And the part about the box." "Luca!" She stood up, hovering over him. "Do you need water? Should I call the nurse?" "I need you to stop crying," he said gently. He squeezed her hand, weak but present. "And I need to know, was the box worth 40 stitches? She let out a watery laugh, wiping her eyes. She pulled the tin box from her bag and placed it on the bedside table. "It's a picture of my mother, and my grandmother's locket. It's all I have." He looked at the box, then at her. His expression sobered. "Then it was worth it." She leaned down, unable to help herself, and kissed him. It was gentle, careful of his injuries, but poured full of all the fear and love of the last 6 hours. When she pulled back, he was smiling. "So, you love me." She blushed, her face heating up. "You were supposed to be unconscious." "I am a light sleeper." He moved his hand to cup her cheek. "Why did you run, Madeline? That first day, why did you fight it so hard? Was it just him?" She looked away, staring at the heart monitor. "It wasn't just him, it was me. I thought I was broken. I thought that if I let anyone in, I would just bleed on them. I thought I was only made for running. Survivors don't stop. Luca, if they stop, the bad things catch up." She looked back at him, her eyes clear. "I ran because I didn't think I deserved to stand still. I didn't think I deserved a garden on a roof, or someone who cooks pasta at midnight. I thought I belonged to the fear." Luca listened, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't tell her she was wrong. He just acknowledged the pain. "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, placing her hand over his heart. "I know that running just takes you in circles. I don't want to run anymore." "Good," he whispered, his eyes drifting shut as the exhaustion pulled at him. "Because I am in no condition to chase you." He fell asleep holding her hand. 2 days later. Angelo came to the hospital room. Madeline was peeling an orange for Luca, who was sitting up, looking impatient and irritable, which the doctor said was a sign of excellent recovery. "It's done, boss," Angelo said, standing at the foot of the bed. Luca paused. "And?" "Agent Miller got the tip. They picked Darren up at the bus station. He was trying to get a ticket to Jersey with a fake ID. He had a broken wrist and a lot of bruises. He sang like a bird before they even got him in the car. He gave up the Di Castro distribution hub in the Bronx to cut a deal." "A deal?" Madeline asked, her knife pausing on the orange peel. "Federal prison," Angelo said with a grim smile. 20 years, minimum. And the Di Castros, well, they aren't happy with him. He's going into protective custody, which in prison means solitary. He's gone. Madeline. He's buried in a hole of his own making." Madeline set the orange down. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders, a physical sensation of lightness she hadn't felt in years. The boogeyman wasn't dead. He was just irrelevant. He was a number in a federal system. He was gone. She looked at Luca. He was watching her, gauging her reaction. "Is that justice?" she asked him. "It is the end," Luca said. "He can never touch you again. That is justice enough for me." He held out his hand. Madeline took it. "Take me home, Madeline," he said. "I hate this hospital food," she smiled, squeezing his hand. "Okay, let's go home." And for the first time in her life, she knew exactly where that was. The following week settled into a rhythm that was entirely new. The penthouse, once a fortress of glass and steel, began to feel like a home. The silence was no longer empty. It was peaceful. Luca's wound healed, leaving a long, puckered scar across his ribs that Madeline would trace with her fingers when he slept. The war with the Di Castro family, fractured by Darren's testimony and the subsequent federal raids, had simmered down to a cold, watchful truce. Madeline was no longer a ghost haunting its hallways. She was a presence. She filled the sterile, masculine space with the scent of vanilla and baked bread. She had found a brochure on his desk, a leaflet for one of the city's most exclusive culinary institutes. She had stared at it, her heart thumping. That night, she had approached him, the paper clutched in her hand. "I want to do this," she said, her voice clear, no trace of a question in it. "But I will not have you pay for it. I will get a job. I will take out a loan." Luca had looked up from the ledger he was reading. He looked at her, at the flour dusting her cheek, at the determination in her eyes. He said nothing, but reached into his desk, pulled out a checkbook, and began to write. "No, Luca," I said. He tore the check from the book and slid it across the desk. It was made out to the institute, for the full tuition paid in full. "It is not a gift," he said, his voice low. "It is an investment. In my pastry chef, I expect interest." "Interest? You will bake for me every night for the next 50 years. She had laughed, a sound that was becoming more and more, and it was not a cage, it was a partnership. She enrolled. Her days became a flurry of activity she had never thought she would experience. She learned the difference between a brioche chenaille and a croissant, the precise temperature to temper chocolate, and the art of a perfect sugar glaze. She came home dusted in flour, exhausted and completely, incandescently happy. She was not just surviving, she was creating. She was reclaiming joy. One evening, Luca came home to find her asleep on the kitchen island, her head pillowed on a massive open textbook titled The Art of French Patisserie. A small, triumphant-looking row of cream puffs was lined up on a cooling rack. He picked one up, bit into it, and closed his eyes. He picked her up, her textbook still in her hand, and carried her to their bed. He did not wake her. He just watched her, this woman who had brought life and sugar and chaos into his perfect, orderly world. About a month after the attack, when the city was still gripped by the gray, relentless chill of early winter, Luca came into the kitchen. Madeline was kneading dough, a furious, focused rhythm. "Pack a bag," he said. She paused, her hands sticky. "Pack a bag? Is something wrong?" "Pack a bag," he repeated, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "And do not bring flour." He took her to a place where the world was made of water and sand. It was a house, 3 hours south, perched on the dunes of a quiet, forgotten beach. It was not grand. It was all weathered wood, and wide windows that let the ocean light pour in. It smelled of salt, cedar, and peace. There were no guards, at least none she could see. There was no city noise. There was only the roar of the waves and the cry of the gulls. That first afternoon, they walked for miles. The sand was cold and damp, clinging to her bare feet. Luca had rolled up his pants, his own feet bare, and he looked younger than she had ever seen him. The lines of stress around his eyes had faded. She held his hand. It was a simple, uncomplicated thing. His hand was large, calloused, and it enveloped hers completely. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. They walked, and they breathed in the cold, clean air. And they just were. She felt a profound sense of stillness, a quiet she had never known. The fear, the constant, thrumming anxiety that had been her shadow for years, was gone. It had been washed away by the tide, leaving her scoured and new. That night, he built a fire in a rusted pit on the beach. They sat on a thick blanket, the flames of vibrant, dancing orange against the deep, velvet black of the sky. The stars were not the pinpricks she saw from the penthouse. They were a thick, glittering spill of diamonds. So close she felt she could reach up and touch them. "I have never seen this," she whispered, her head on his shoulder. "I didn't know it was real." "They are always here," he said, his arm tightening around her. "You just have to be in the right place to see them." He was quiet for a long time, watching the fire. Then he shifted, reaching into the pocket of the blanket. "I have something for you," he said. Her heart fluttered. "Luca." He pulled out a small, simple box made of dark, polished wood. He opened it. It was not a diamond. It was a ring, but like nothing she had ever seen. It was a simple, wide band of brushed silver, crafted to look like 2 intertwined vines with tiny, perfectly carved leaves. It was a piece of art. It was a piece of his garden. "It is not a proposal," he said, his voice rough, as if he were afraid. I will not trap you with a promise you are not ready for." He took the ring out of the box. "It is a promise of a different kind. It is a promise that I am here, that I am yours, to have, in whatever way you want me, that I am not going anywhere." He held her gaze, his dark eyes full of the firelight. "When you are ready, Madalena, I am yours." Tears welled in her eyes, hot and sudden, but they were not tears of fear or gratitude. They were tears of a love so profound it physically hurt. She had been a survivor. It was making her brave. She did not speak. She reached up, her hand cupping his jaw, his stubble rough against her palm. She pulled him down to her. The kiss was slow and radiant. It tasted of salt and smoke and a future she had never, ever thought she would have. His skin was warm from the fire, almost sun-kissed in the glow. The only sound was the crackle of the flames and the long, slow whisper of the waves rolling onto the shore. His hand came up, his fingers tangling in her hair, not to pull, not to control, but to anchor himself. He kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, with a deep, reverent hunger that made her bones melt. She pulled back, her breath coming in soft gasps. She looked at him, at this impossible, dangerous, gentle man, and she knew. She had not been his. She had not been Darren's. She had been Fear's, but not anymore. "I want this, Luca," she whispered, her voice trembling. not with fear, but with a new, fierce confidence. "I want you, and I am ready." He searched her face, and what he saw there must have been the truth, because the iron control in his eyes finally broke, replaced by a wave of raw, possessive love. He slid the ring onto her fourth finger. It was a perfect fit. He did not carry her. They walked back to the house. Hand in hand, they made love in the bedroom, with the doors wide open to the night, the sound of the ocean filling the room. It was not the desperate, healing discovery of the candlelight. This was a choice. It was a celebration. It was confident and slow and sure. His hands and his mouth mapped her body, not with the desperation of a first touch, but with the loving, patient memorization of a man who planned to spend a lifetime learning her. And for the first time, Madeline did not just receive, she took it. She was bold, her own hands exploring the landscape of his body, the scars and the strength. It was a dance of two equals, two people who had seen the darkness and had chosen, definitely, to find the light. It was a claim, and it was a surrender, and it was perfect. When they returned to the city, everything was the same, but everything was different. The silver ring was a solid, comforting weight on her hand. The penthouse was home. 1 week later, she stood in front of her old apartment building. She had told Luca she was going. "Why?" he had asked, a flicker of the old possessiveness in his eyes. "To visit Rosie," she said, "and to say goodbye." He had not forbidden it. He had not argued. He had just looked at her, at the ring on her finger. "Angelo will drive you." "No," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I will take a cab. I am not afraid. Not anymore." She walked into the Café Siena. It was just as she had left it, the same smell, the same buzzing fluorescent light. Rosie was at the counter, her hair a violent shade of electric blue. She looked up, and her jaw dropped. "Oh my God," Rosie breathed. "Maddie?" Madeline smiled. "Hi, Rosie." "Hi, hi. You disappear for 2 months. Everyone thinks you're dead or in witness protection, and you walk in here looking like, who even are you?" It was true. Madeline, in a soft, cream-colored wool coat Luca had bought her hair shiny and healthy, her skin clear and glowing, was a different person. She was not the pale, trembling girl who used to flinch at the sound of the bell. I'm good, Rosie," she said, and her laugh was a full, warm sound. "I'm really, really good." They talked for an hour. Madeline did not tell her everything. She told her she had met someone. She told her she was in baking school. She told her she was happy. Rosie hugged her, tight. "You deserve it, honey. After all the crap. You really do." Madeline left the cafe, the bell chiming behind her. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, the street she used to walk in terror, and she saw him, across the street, a man in a dark coat, leaning against a lamppost, watching her, the old, cold muscle of fear clenched in her stomach, her breath hitched, her hand tightened on her purse. He was too far away to see his face, but the posture, it was the posture of a man who was waiting. She froze. The world tilted. He's in jail. He's in jail. But her body didn't know. Her body only knew the shadow, the street, the threat, then a black sedan, so silent it was almost invisible, glided to the curb in front of her. The back window lowered. Luca Moretti sat in the back, his face unreadable, his dark eyes fixed on her. He had not come to save her. He had not come to fight. He just gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, a nod that said, "I am here." The man across the street was Angelo, a smile, slow and bright and fearless, spread across Madeline's face. She felt the last, tiny, cold fragment of fear inside her simply melt away, like snow in the sun. She was not a girl hiding in an alley. She was a woman, loved by the man who owned the shadows. She nodded back at Luca, a promise, and turned to walk down the street, not to the cab, but just to walk, to feel the air, to be in the world. "I used to belong to fear," she whispered to the Brooklyn air. "Now, I belong to no one but myself, and maybe him." Thank you so much for listening to our story. We hope you enjoyed the journey of Madeline and Luca. Where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments below. For more stories just like this, be sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and hit that notification bell. We love hearing your thoughts, so please share them. And we will see you in the next story.